Hi, I'm Arielle. I'm 22 years old. I go to Ramapo College and I am a transgender woman. I use she, her, hers pronouns. So I always had a concept of my gender identity. Even before I had a word or words to describe it, I had a concept of being female. And so I'd always wear dresses when I was little and tell my mom that when I grew up, I wanted to be a mother, not a father. And they were like, oh, that's cute. That's, he's adorable. Just a little kid, saying things. They say things. I always knew there was something off. That was something that was different about me. I wanted to hang out with girls because I related to them, because I felt connected to them, because I felt like them, but they didn't feel like me. And so as I was older, I started to develop more of a concept of gender, but I didn't have a word for it until I was about 12 years old, and my mom, sister, and I were watching Ugly Betty. And there's a transgender character, Alexis, and so I asked my mom, I was like, Mom, what is Alexis? And this is not the term for it anymore, but this was a term my mom used at the time. She was like, oh, Alexis is transsexual. The term is transgender, and that is how I identify. And I thought, wow, I think that's me. And I didn't say this to her, but I thought this in my head. And as time went on, I talked to my therapist about it. I eventually started talking to my sister about it a little bit and really started to develop a sense of being transgender, being female, starting to understand what that meant. And it wasn't until I was 18 that I started to claim a transgender identity, came out to my family, came out to my friends, and started to be me. My family has worked very hard to be supportive, but it wasn't always that way. When I first came out, my sister was immediately supportive. The day she found out, she maybe used he pronouns once, and I don't think she has ever referred to me as male since then. My dad, on the other hand, was not accepting to begin with. Initially, he just ignored it, and that was the case for probably the first almost 2 years of me coming out. We didn't really talk about it. We maintained a surfacey relationship. My parents got divorced right after I came out, and so I didn't really have to see him. And when I saw him, we didn't talk about it. It was just he didn't want to talk about it. Whenever I brought it up, he would change the topic very quickly. Until I got to college. And when I got to college, I wanted to start to transition. And I had mentioned that, but because he wasn't supportive, I didn't really have the conversation with him that was my intention, but it always was. So one of the first nights of college, I went out to dinner with my dad and sister. And my dad was visibly uncomfortable when we went to dinner because I was wearing more makeup than he'd seen me in before, and I'd bought a purse. I started to express a female gender identity. I didn't think he was horrified the way he later expressed that he was, but apparently he was. And so the next evening, he called me and he basically called me disgusting and a repulsion and told me that I would never ever be his daughter and that he was not going to accept me. And after that phone call, that was in September, I didn't talk to him until March. I went back to my suite that night and cried to my roommates, who were all very supportive, and thus ensued a really, really hard 6-month period of time where I didn't talk to my father and didn't have his financial support and didn't have his emotional support and didn't really know if I ever would. And so in March, he bought me a birthday card that said, "Happy birthday, daughter." So I was expecting more of the same, and I also really didn't know what to think of what he was saying, how much of it was genuine, how much he really was planning to accept me. But I decided to hear him out. And we went to dinner a couple weeks later, and he really was very supportive. You know, he always wanted me to be his little boy, and I could never be that. And all my life, even before I came out, he resented me for that. And now here he was, truly showing that he was going to be on my side, on my team, and emotionally and financially support me through something that was ultimately really positive for me. And I think that night he realized for the first time that it was a positive change in my life. In picking my name, I actually went through a few different ideas. I wanted something pretty feminine, not something that could be considered gender neutral, so that, you know, at least in the early stages of my transition, that when I introduce myself, I could be perceived as introducing myself as female and maybe not have to necessarily explain that I wanted people to use she, her pronouns. That part of the plan was a little iffy in the early stages of my transition because I was still having trouble presenting as female the way I wanted to. But the first name I went with was actually Gabby. It didn't feel like me. And so ultimately, when I was at boarding school, I decided that I wanted to keep the same initials because I had a couple monogrammed things that I wanted to keep. And I liked having a vowel for a first initial. And so I opened a document on my computer where I put it in rainbow font and put a bunch of A names, you know, Abby, Alexandra, and I read them out and I took some time to think of them, and ultimately Arielle just felt right. It was my name. A name change is definitely, a legal name change is on the horizon for me somewhere. Getting my name legally changed is not only an expensive process, but it's also pretty tedious. I have to go to court, make an appearance. I have to publish in a paper that I'm getting my name changed, which is kind of an intrusive thing, but they do it so that you can prove that you're not changing your name to avoid the law or to avoid having to pay money to the IRS. I work in a place, Starbucks, that allows you to go by the name you want to go by on all their papers, besides any legal or financial papers. So in my workplace, all my papers say Arielle. Ramapo will not change the name on your ID unless you've gotten your name legally changed, which I think is ridiculous, because why give us our numbers if they tell us that they can't possibly identify us if we have a name on our ID that differs from our legal name? They can go, put my R number in the system, and spit out my name. No one needs to sweat my ID. I have it crossed out on my school ID anyway. I've Sharpied it out. I've gotten told that I can't do that, but to me, it's preferable to swiping my ID and having people know a name that has caused me so much grief just because they took my school ID and saw it. Specifically at Rampo is every semester before I start classes, if I don't want to be dead named, I have to email my professors to tell them, hey, this is the name I use, this is my name. And I have to just pray every semester that I have professors that are going to be accommodating. And even when I send them that email, sometimes they will print their roster daily off of Luminous, and on Luminous you can't change your name. One thing people should know about trans people is that we are all just trying to exist like everyone else. There's a whole wide range of people among the transgender population, which is millions of people, and we're all just trying to live our lives.